The luminous sanctum was a chamber carved from the heart of a solidified nebula, its crystalline walls pulsing with the captured light of 1,000 dying suns. Here, where the Valthran Dominion had held counsel for millennia, silence was a physical weight, a currency of power wielded by the luminous matriarch who presided from her throne of living crystal. The air itself, a carefully curated blend of inert gases and psychic resonance, hummed with unspoken anxieties. Before the throne stood High Adjudicator Kalen, his bioluminous carapace shimmering with the controlled blues and greens of deep concern. His thoughts were a vortex of strategic probabilities and grim certainties, a stark contrast to the placid, eternal light of the sanctum. For generations, the Valthran had considered themselves the architects of galactic stability, their slow, deliberate expansion a form of cosmic gardening. Now that garden was threatened by weeds, the Cathar Confederacy, a species whose philosophy was as sharp and brutal as their obsidian warships. The debate had raged for cycles, a stately, ritualized argument that did little to mask the fear coiling in the chamber's resonant core. The Cathar were massing along the Veil of Whispers, a volatile, resource-rich expanse of space that both empires now claimed. To the Valthran, it was a sacred border, a place of cosmic reverence. To the Cathar, it was merely the next prize. War was no longer a possibility. It was an inevitability, a storm gathering just beyond the horizon, and every member of the High Council could feel the oppressive drop in atmospheric pressure. Kalen had just finished his report, his voice a low, melodic chime that carried the discordant notes of impending conflict. He detailed the Cathar fleet dispositions, their logistical strengths, their warlords' escalating rhetoric. He spoke of unacceptable losses, of compromised principles, of a future stained by a war that would bleed both empires white. "They are barbarians," resonated a thought form from one of the elder counselors, a being whose crystalline structure was so ancient it had begun to cloud. "They understand only force. We have offered them dialogue, demarcation, shared stewardship. They see our reason as weakness." The matriarch's light pulsed once, a slow, deep indigo that commanded absolute attention. "And what is your counsel, High Adjudicator? You have outlined the path to war. Show us the path to victory." Before Kalen could articulate a response, a new light flickered at the edge of the great star map suspended in the chamber's center. It was a soft, unassuming chime, a notification from the outer sensor grids that was so rare it drew the focus of every being present. An attendant, a lesser functionary whose form was a simple, elegant swirl of light and matter, drifted forward. Its voice was a synthesized harmony, devoid of emotion but laced with an undeniable urgency. "Apologies for the intrusion, Luminous One, High Council. We have an anomaly. A single unidentified vessel has just translated from hyperspace at the precise border of the Veil of Whispers. It is holding a stationary orbit. Its energy signature is unknown." A murmur, like the grinding of tectonic plates, moved through the council. Unknown signatures were not unheard of: rogue traders, forgotten colony ships. But at this location, at this exact moment, it felt like a discordant note in a symphony of cosmic tension. "Cathar stealth technology?" Another counselor posited, his carapace flashing a sharp, suspicious yellow. "The signature does not match any known Cathar profile, even their most classified prototypes," the attendant replied. "The profile is rudimentary, almost primitive in its power output, yet its transition was flawlessly executed. There are no residual gravitational distortions. It is clean, too clean." Kalen moved closer to the star map, his multifaceted eyes focusing on the single point of new light. It was positioned with almost mathematical perfection between the massed Valthran fleets and the encroaching Cathar armadas. A fly daring to land between two colliding asteroids. "Its origin?" he asked, his voice tight. "The trajectory vector traces back to the Sol system," the attendant stated. "It is human." The word hung in the resonant air, heavy with dismissal. Humans, a young species barely spacefaring by galactic standards. They were a footnote in the grand Valthran archives, a race of chaotic, short-lived mammals confined to a small cluster of star systems, notable only for their perplexing cultural broadcasts and their bafflingly rapid yet limited expansion. They were considered a curiosity, not a player, an insect, not a predator. "A single human ship," the elder counselor scoffed, his light flickering with contempt. "They have strayed far from their quiet little garden. Do they not understand the forces they are placing themselves between? It is an irrelevance, a statistical error. I. Nor it." But Kalen could not ignore it. He had studied the humans more than most. He had spent cycles sifting through their fragmented history, their philosophies, their art. He saw not chaos, but a terrifying capacity for adaptation. He saw not primitivism, but a relentless, focused drive. Their technology appeared crude, but their theoretical physics was advancing at a rate that defied Valthran understanding. They were quiet, yes, but it was the quiet of a deep ocean, not an empty one. This was not a stray vessel. Its placement was too precise, too deliberate. It was a statement. "Luminous matriarch," Kalen said, his voice ringing with a conviction that silenced the murmurs. "To dismiss this is a grave error. The humans are not a predictable species. Their history is a litany of self-inflicted cataclysms followed by renaissances of impossible speed. They are a paradox, creators and destroyers, philosophers and warlords. We assume their technology is inferior because it does not resonate on the same frequencies as our own, but what if it is simply different? What if this single ship is not a mistake, but a message?" The sanctum fell silent again, the weight of Kalen's words settling upon them. The single, tiny point of light on the map seemed to grow, its significance expanding to fill the vast chamber. Outside, the fleets of two mighty empires prepared for a war that would shape the galaxy for the next 1,000 years. And between them sat a vessel from a species no one had ever thought to take seriously, a silent, solitary observer waiting for the storm to break. The fate of two empires was about to be decided, and an unknown, entirely unforeseen variable had just been introduced into the equation. The pulsing light of the sanctum seemed, for the first time in an eon, to hold a tremor of true uncertainty. In the command citadel of the Cathar warship Raptor's Claw, the atmosphere was a stark opposite to the Valthran sanctum. It was a place of heat, pressure, and raw, untempered aggression. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and metal, and the low, guttural commands of its crew echoed off bulkheads of dark, non-reflective plating. At its center, seated upon a throne forged from the salvaged hulls of defeated enemies, was Warlord Jackrel. His scales were the color of cooling magma, and his eyes burned with the singular focus of a predator. Before him, a holographic display shimmered, showing the same anomaly that had silenced the Valthran Council, the lone human ship. "Human," Jackrel's voice was a gravelly rasp, a sound that promised violence. He spat the word as if it were an insult. "They are a nursery species. Their transmissions are filled with noise, sentiment, and biological imperatives. Why are they here?" Envoy Grak, a leaner, more cunning Cathar whose scales were a polished obsidian, bowed his head slightly. "Warlord, our long-range sensors confirm the Valthran analysis. A single vessel of human origin. Its energy readings are negligible. Its weapon signatures are non-existent." "Non-existent?" Jackrel leaned forward, his massive claws gripping the arms of his throne. "A vessel without weapons in a contested zone? This is either the act of a fool or a declaration of utter contempt." He bared his teeth in what passed for a Cathar smile. "Perhaps they believe their weakness is a shield, a pathetic plea for mercy." "Or perhaps it is a probe," Grak suggested, his gaze fixed on the display. "A scout sent to observe the coming conflict. The humans are known for their insatiable curiosity." "Then they will receive a lesson in the dangers of idle observation," Jackrel declared. He gestured to his communications officer. "Open a channel, all frequencies, unencrypted. Let the Valthran listen. Let them witness the swiftness of Cathar justice." The channel opened with a crackle of static. The human ship did not respond immediately. Seconds stretched into a minute, an act of defiance that caused Jackrel's tail to lash against the deck plating. The Cathar saw hesitation as weakness and silence as disrespect. Finally, a voice came through. It was calm, measured, and completely devoid of inflection. It was a female voice, speaking flawless, if slightly sterile, Cathar standard dialect. "This is Captain Eva Rostova of the United Terran Vessel Vigilance. We are receiving you." The name of the ship, Vigilance, was noted by Envoy Grak. It was a word that implied watchfulness, a deliberate state of being, not exploration, not diplomacy, vigilance. Jackrel leaned into his comm unit, his voice a low growl. "Captain Rostova, you have entered a designated Cathar Confederacy military exclusion zone. This sector is on the verge of purification. Your presence is an unauthorized intrusion. State your purpose or be removed." There was another pause, shorter this time, but just as unnerving in its tranquility. The human captain seemed to be considering her words with a level of care the Cathar found. "Infuriating. Warlord Jackrel, We are here on a mission of observation under the Interspecies Neutrality Accords, to which your Confederacy is not a signatory, but whose principles are recognized as galactic common law. Our purpose is to witness, to record, and to understand." Jackrell's laughter was a harsh, barking sound. "Understand? You will understand the trajectory of our plasma cannons if you do not vacate this sector immediately. We are not a subject for your academic study, human. This is a matter of imperial destiny. Your insignificant vessel is a distraction." He made a cutting motion with his hand to the tactical officer. "Move a squadron forward. Envelop them. Do not fire, but make our intent clear." On the holographic display, a cluster of Cathar-strike craft, sleek, predatory ships shaped like arrowheads, detached from the main fleet and began a swift, menacing approach toward the lone human ship. Their engines burned with white-hot fury, a stark visual contrast to the cold, dark hull of the Vigilance. The Valthran, from their own command ships miles away, observed this exchange with rapt attention. High Adjudicator Kalen watched the tactical display from the bridge of his flagship, the Starlight Decree. His mandibles were clenched. The Cathar were acting exactly as he had predicted, with brute force and no subtlety. They saw the human ship as an insect to be swatted. He, however, saw a chess piece of unknown power, and the Cathar were about to knock it over without understanding its function. "They will destroy it," his second-in-command whispered, his own carapace a pale, anxious lilac. "And we will learn nothing." "No," Kalen replied, his gaze unwavering. "Watch, listen. The humans did not come here to be destroyed." Aboard the Vigilance, Captain Rostova's voice came over the channel again, as serene as before, even as the Cathar warships closed in around her vessel, their weapons' ports glowing with contained energy. "Warlord Jackrell, I must respectfully decline your request to withdraw. Our mission parameters are clear. We will not interfere, but we will not retreat. We are here to bear witness." "Bear witness to your own annihilation," Jackrell roared, his patience finally snapping. "You have been warned. This is your final." He was cut off, not by a communication jam, not by a weapon discharge, but by a subtle, profound change on the tactical display. The Cathar squadron, which had been executing a precise encirclement maneuver, suddenly faltered. Their vectors became erratic. Two of the ships veered off course, narrowly avoiding a collision. Alarms began to blare on the bridge of the Raptor's claw. "Warlord, all ships in the forward squadron are reporting total sensor failure," the tactical officer shouted, his usual composure cracking. "Navigational systems are offline. They are flying blind. They can't get a lock on the human ship. They can't get a lock on anything." Jackrell stared at the display. The human ship hadn't moved. It hadn't emitted any detectable energy pulse. It hadn't deployed countermeasures. It simply sat there, a void in space. And yet the space around it had become incomprehensible to Cathar technology. It was as if the laws of physics had been selectively suspended in a bubble around the Vigilance. Envoy Grax stepped forward, his eyes wide. "Warlord, they did not raise shields, they did not deploy weapons, they have done nothing, yet our most advanced strike craft are disabled." On the Valthran flagship, the same sense of profound disbelief was dawning. Kalen's sensor technicians were reporting the same phenomenon. "High Adjudicator, the space around the human vessel is gravitationally inert. The Cathar sensor pulses are not reflecting, they are being absorbed. No, not absorbed, nullified. It is as if that sphere of space no longer interacts with conventional spacetime. It is a scientific impossibility." Kalen felt a coldness spread through his being, a feeling alien to his warm-blooded physiology. This was not technology as the Valthran or the Cathar understood it. It was not a more powerful weapon or a stronger shield. It was a fundamental redefinition of reality. The humans were not playing the same game. They were not even on the same board. They were the ones who had designed the board, and they could change its rules at will. The lone, silent warship, which had been dismissed as an irrelevance, had just neutralized a squadron of elite Cathar predators without firing a shot, without raising a shield, without moving an inch. It had done so with a calm, quiet finality that was more terrifying than any weapon in the arsenals of the two empires combined. In the stunned silence that followed, Captain Rostova's voice returned to the open channel, her tone unchanged, as if she were commenting on a minor celestial event. "Warlord Jackrell, High Adjudicator Kalen, I believe we have established that our presence here is non-negotiable. Our mission of observation will continue. However, the current situation presents a unique opportunity. The confluence of your two great powers and our own humble vessel allows for a dialogue that might otherwise be impossible. I would like to extend a formal invitation to one representative from the Valthran Dominion and one from the Cathar Confederacy to come aboard the Vigilance. We have much to discuss. The future of this sector, and perhaps a great deal more, may depend on it. The invitation was audacious, almost insulting in its premise. A representative of a nursery species summoning the envoys of two galactic empires as if they were squabbling children, and yet no one was laughing. Jackrell's rage was frozen, replaced by a cold, unfamiliar sensation, uncertainty. Kalen felt a thrill that was equal parts fear and exhilaration. He had been right. The humans were the ultimate unknown variable, and they had just made their first move. The war for the Veil of Whispers had just been put on hold, postponed by a single human warship that had changed everything without ever revealing if it was a weapon at all. The journey to the Vigilance was an exercise in controlled paranoia for both Envoy Grak and High Adjudicator Kalen. They arrived in separate, single-pilot diplomatic shuttles, approaching the human ship from opposite directions, their hulls gleaming under the eerie light of the Veil of Whispers. The Vigilance remained a stark silhouette against the swirling cosmic gases, a vessel of brutalist simplicity. Its hull was a matte, non-reflective black, devoid of the elegant crystalline filigree of Valthran ships or the aggressive, bladed prows of the Cathar. It was a shape of pure function, and its function was now the most terrifying mystery in the galaxy. A single, almost invisible docking bay door irised open, bathed in a soft, neutral white light, an invitation into the unknown. Kalen was the first to dock. As he stepped out of his shuttle, he was met not by an armed honor guard or a formal diplomatic attaché, but by a single human male in a simple, dark gray uniform. The human was unremarkable in appearance, of average height and build, his face impassive. He gave a slight, formal nod. "High Adjudicator Kalen, welcome aboard the Vigilance. I am Officer Chen. If you will follow me, the captain is waiting." The interior of the ship was as Spartan as its exterior. The corridors were wide, clean, and illuminated by the same soft, indirect lighting. There was no art, no ceremony, no indication of cultural identity beyond a profound sense of purpose. The air was recycled with near-perfect efficiency, carrying only the faint, sterile scent of machinery and filtered life support. Kalen noted the silence. On a Valthran vessel, there was always a low hum of energy, a psychic resonance of the crew. On a Cathar ship, there was the constant clang of machinery and the guttural sounds of the crew. Here, there was only a deep, abiding quiet, the sound of a perfectly calibrated machine at rest. They arrived at a simple briefing room. A large, circular table dominated the space, its surface a dark, featureless material. A moment later, Envoy Grak was escorted in by another silent human officer. The Cathar envoy's movements were tense, his head swiveling as he took in the surroundings, his posture radiating suspicion and barely contained aggression. He and Kalen acknowledged each other with a frigid nod, the animosity between their empires a palpable force in the room. Then a door slid open and Captain Eva Rostova entered. She was taller than the other humans Kalen had seen, but she projected no sense of physical intimidation. Her presence was defined by an almost absolute stillness. Her hair was dark, pulled back from a face that was calm and unlined, her eyes a deep, startling gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. She wore the same simple uniform as her crew. She moved to the head of the table, her steps silent. "High Adjudicator Kalen, Envoy Grak," she began, her voice the same one they had heard over the comms, measured, calm, and carrying an authority that had nothing to do with rank or title. "Thank you for accepting my invitation. I understand the unconventional nature of this meeting. Please be seated." Kalen and Grak took their seats, the tension between them a chasm. Rostova remained standing for a moment, her gaze moving between them not as a judge, but as an analyst studying two fascinating but dangerously volatile chemical compounds. "I will be direct," she said, her hands resting lightly on the back of her chair. "My purpose here is not to mediate your conflict. Humanity does not presume to have the right or the wisdom to interfere in the sovereign affairs of other civilizations. We are, as I stated, observers. However, our observations have led us to a conclusion that supersedes your territorial dispute over the Veil of Whispers." Grak let out a low growl. "Your conkel." Fusion is irrelevant. This is a matter of Cathar territory, of resources vital to the survival and expansion of the Confederacy. The Valthrans seek to deny us our destiny, to suffocate us with their stagnant traditions. Your interference, however you frame it, serves only them. Kalen's carapace shifted, emitting a low chime of dissent. The Veil is a site of deep cosmic significance, a cradle of stellar formation that your warlord wishes to strip mine into oblivion. Our stewardship is a sacred duty, not a denial of your destiny. Your destiny, envoy, seems to be endless, mindless consumption. Rostova held up a hand, a simple, disarming gesture that somehow cut through the rising hostility. Your perspectives are noted, and from your respective cultural and historical standpoints, they are entirely valid. You are both acting in what you perceive to be the best interests of your people. The conflict is logical, it is predictable, and it is, I am afraid, entirely meaningless. The word meaningless hung in the air, a profound insult to both empires. Centuries of history, of political maneuvering, of military buildup, dismissed in a single word by a representative of a species that had been using combustion engines when the Valthrin were charting galaxies. "You dare," Grak began, rising from his seat. "Please," Rostova said, her voice dropping slightly, yet gaining an intensity that made the Cathar envoy slowly sink back into his chair. "Allow me to provide context." She gestured to the table. Its dark surface shimmered and came to life, transforming into a three-dimensional, high-fidelity map of the Veil of Whispers. It was more detailed than any star chart either Kalen or Grak had ever seen. The swirling clouds of gas and dust were rendered with impossible clarity, revealing the complex gravimetric currents and energy flows within. "Your empires are poised for war over the resources in this nebula," Rostova continued, her finger tracing a path through the holographic gas clouds. "Specifically, the unusually high concentrations of exotic matter and heavy elements being generated by the stellar nurseries at its core. You believe this is a naturally occurring, if rare, phenomenon." She paused, letting her statement settle. "You are mistaken. The Veil of Whispers is not a natural nebula. It is an artifact." Kalen stared at the map, his analytical mind racing. An artifact, a nebula of this scale, it was unthinkable. The energy required to shape something so vast was beyond comprehension. "What do you mean, artifact?" he asked, his voice a low hum of disbelief. Rostova's finger stopped at the very heart of the nebula, a region of such intense energy that it was opaque to both Valthrin and Cathar sensors. On the human map, however, the interference cleared, peeling back layer by layer like an onion. And at the center, where there should have been a cluster of protostars, there was something else. A structure. It was a perfect sphere, impossibly large, its surface a lattice of geometric patterns that defied known principles of engineering. It was dark, ancient, and utterly silent. It was a machine the size of a solar system, and the entire Veil of Whispers, the stellar nurseries, the resource fields, the gravitational anomalies, was its exhaust, its effluent, the byproduct of a process that had likely been running for eons. Grak was speechless, his reptilian jaw slack. Kalen felt a wave of vertigo, a sense of scale so profound it threatened to overwhelm his consciousness. The sacred ground his people revered, the prize for which Grak's people were willing to die, it was nothing more than the industrial waste of a machine built by gods. "What is it?" Kalen managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. "We do not know," Rostova answered, her tone heavy with the weight of that admission. "We call it the engine. We have been studying it from a distance for decades. Its existence is the single most guarded secret in human history. We believed it to be dormant, perhaps inert. We were wrong." She zoomed the image in further. A faint, rhythmic pulse of energy was now visible, emanating from the surface of the sphere. It was not a strong signal, but it was structured, complex. It was a message. "Several of your local solar cycles ago," Rostova explained, "the engine began to emit this signal. It is not a broadcast in the conventional sense. It is a subspace resonance keyed to a very specific frequency. The recent stellar activity in the Veil, the very thing that has drawn the attention of your empires and made the resources so tantalizingly abundant, is a direct result of this signal. The engine is waking up." This was the great reveal. The human warship was not a weapon. It was a research vessel, a scientific outpost on the precipice of the greatest discovery in galactic history. Their mysterious technology, the space-time distortion that had neutralized the Cathar squadron, was not a weapon system. It was a form of observational shielding, a way to create a bubble of stable reality in order to take precise measurements of the engine without being affected by its monumental gravitational and energetic influence. They had not come to interfere in a war. They had come because the very ground on which that war was to be fought was beginning to stir in its sleep. "Why tell us this?" Grak demanded, his mind struggling to process the sheer scale of the revelation. His warlord's ambitions, the Confederacy's grand strategy, it all seemed so small, so pathetic in the shadow of that colossal artifact. "Because you are here," Rostova said simply, "and your impending war is a complication we cannot afford. Your fleets, numbering in the thousands, are preparing to unleash energies that this quadrant has not seen in millennia. You are fighting in the shadow of a machine we do not understand, a machine that is beginning to show signs of activity. Your war is the equivalent of two microbes battling over a nutrient speck on the skin of a sleeping giant. The danger is not that one of you will win. The danger is that your conflict will wake it up." Her words fell into a profound silence. The animosity between Kalen and Grak had not vanished, but it was now overshadowed by a shared, primal awe and a dawning, terrible fear. The vigilance had not come to change the balance of power between their empires. It had come to inform them that they were, and always had been, utterly powerless before a force they had never even known existed. The fate of their empires was no longer in their own hands. It was tied to the whims of a silent, sleeping god at the heart of the Veil of Whispers, and the humans were the only ones who had come to listen to its dreams. The revelation settled over the briefing room, a palpable weight that crushed centuries of imperial pride and military ambition into dust. Kalen, the strategist, saw every calculation, every projection he had ever made rendered obsolete. His mind, usually a precise instrument of logic and order, was reeling from the sheer, paradigm-shattering scale of the truth. He looked at the holographic engine, a silent, dark sphere that dwarfed the suns being born in its wake, and felt the profound insignificance of his entire species. The Valthran, who saw themselves as galactic stewards, had been tending a garden while oblivious to the volcano slumbering beneath it. Grak, the warrior envoy, was experiencing a different but equally profound crisis. The Cathar philosophy was built on the principle of conquest, of measurable strength and tangible victory, might made right. But what might could they possibly bring to bear against a force that used nebulas as a cooling system? His warlord's grand armada, the pride of the Confederacy, was less than a gnat in the face of this thing. The very concept of conquest became absurd. "This signal," Kalen finally said, his voice a strained whisper. "You have translated it." Rostova's expression, for the first time, showed a flicker of something beyond calm professionalism. It was a deep, somber gravity, the look of someone who has carried a terrible burden for a long time. "We have. The process has taken years. The message is not complex in its language, but its concepts are difficult. It is not a communication. It is a warning." She manipulated the controls on the table. The holographic engine faded, replaced by a series of complex data streams, waveforms, and linguistic models. "The builders of the engine are long gone. They refer to themselves only as the first. The message is their final testament, left behind for any who might follow. It is a historical record and a prophecy." Rostova's voice became very quiet, drawing them in. "According to the archive, life in this galaxy is cyclical, not in a philosophical sense, but a literal one. Civilizations rise, achieve interstellar travel, build empires, and then they vanish. The first were the most advanced of their cycle, and they discovered the cause. It is a phenomenon they call the Great Silence. A wave, not of energy or matter, but of ontological negation. A force that propagates from the galactic core on a cycle of roughly 50 million years. It doesn't destroy civilizations. It erases them. It unwrites them from reality, leaving behind only the faintest cosmic echoes." The air in the room grew cold. Kalen felt the bioluminous patterns on his carapace flicker and dim, ontological negation. It was a concept so terrifying, so absolute, it bordered on theological horror. "The engine," Rostova continued, "was their attempt to stop it, or failing that to survive it. It is a vast, self-sustaining sanctuary, a reality anchor designed to shield this small sector of space from the wave. But they failed. They were too late. The last message is a lament. They activated the engine, but the silence still took them. They were erased, but their machine endured, running on automated protocols for unto. LD Ians. And the signal?" Grak asked, his aggressive posture completely gone, replaced by a stunned, fearful stillness. "The one it started emitting now." "That is the warning," Rostova confirmed. "The engine's external sensors, which have monitored the galaxy for millions of years, have detected the precursor resonance. The next wave of the Great Silence is beginning. It has already started its propagation from the galactic core. Based on our models, it will reach this quadrant in less than one of your standard millennia." A millennium, to a human an eternity, To a Valthrin, a mere historical footnote. Their empire had stood for hundreds of thousands of years. But the stellar activity, Kalen pressed, connecting the pieces. Why is the engine causing it now? The engine is preparing, Rostova said. It is drawing in matter and energy from the veil, initiating a startup sequence to power its primary reality anchoring field. This process, according to the archive, is incredibly violent. The resources your empires are fighting over are not a bounty. They are fuel for a machine preparing for an apocalypse. And your war, the massive, uncontrolled release of energy from your fleets, would be like setting off explosives in a fusion reactor that is just beginning to power up. The feedback could be catastrophic. It could destroy the engine, our only known shield against the silence. Or it could accelerate the process, creating a localized reality collapse that would consume this entire sector long before the wave ever arrived. There it was, the final, crushing weight of their folly. Their war was not just meaningless, it was an act of galactic suicide. They were two factions arguing over who got to pilot a lifeboat, all while drilling holes in its hull. A long silence descended. It was a silence filled with the ghosts of empires, of countless civilizations that had risen and fallen, completely unaware of the cosmic scythe that was periodically harvested them. The Valthrin's pride in their longevity, the Cathar's belief in their manifest destiny. Both were illusions, fleeting moments of consciousness in an endless cycle of oblivion. Grak was the first to speak. His voice was raw, stripped of all its usual arrogance. Warlord Jackrel must be informed. He looked not at Kalen, but at Rostova. He will not believe this. He will see it as a trick, a human deception designed to halt our advance. And the luminous matriarch will see it as a philosophical crisis that could shatter the foundations of Valthrin society, Kalen added, his own thoughts turning to the immense political and cultural upheaval this revelation would cause. Our belief in an ordered, eternal cosmos, it is a lie. Which is why you must convince them, Rostova said, her gaze steady and unwavering. We cannot. We are outsiders, an unknown quantity. If we broadcast this truth to the galaxy, it would cause panic, disbelief, and chaos. It might even be interpreted as a declaration of war, a psychological weapon. The message must come from you, from within your own empires. She extended her hand over the holographic table. We will give you everything. All our data are translations of the first's message, the sensor readings of the engine. You will have irrefutable proof. Your scientists will verify it. Your intelligence agents will find no trace of deception. The truth will speak for itself. She looked from Kalen to Grak, her expression one of profound seriousness. Humanity has known this for 2 generations. We have lived with this knowledge, with this terror. It has changed us. It has forced us to mature, to look beyond our petty squabbles and see the larger picture. We have dedicated our entire civilization to a single purpose, understanding the silence and finding a way to survive it. The Vigilance is not a warship. It is a vessel of hope, and it cannot do this alone. Her words painted a new picture of humanity, not as primitives or chaotic upstarts, but as a species that had been confronted with an existential, Lovecraftian horror and had responded not with despair, but with quiet, determined, unified purpose. Their calmness was not a lack of emotion. It was the product of a terrible, focusing clarity. Their logic was not a rejection of feeling. It was the only tool they had against a foe that was beyond comprehension. Their ethics were not a sign of weakness, but a survival strategy. In the face of cosmic annihilation, cooperation was the only sane path. What do you propose? Kalen asked, the question itself a monumental concession, an admission that the Valthrin Dominion could no longer chart its own course. A ceasefire, Rostova stated, immediately and indefinitely, followed by a tripartite council, Valthrin, Cathar, and human. We will pool our knowledge, our resources, our technology. Your empires have industrial and military capacities that far exceed our own. Humanity has the data, the head start on the research. Together we may have a chance, a slim chance, but a chance nonetheless. We will study the engine, we will work to understand the silence, and we will prepare. She finally took her seat, the invitation and the ultimatum delivered. The choice was now theirs. They could return to their fleets and resume a war for a sliver of land on the edge of a volcano, or they could turn and face the eruption together. Grak and Kalen looked at each other across the table. For the first time, they were not seeing a rival, an obstacle to their empire's ambitions. They were seeing another living being, another mind struggling to comprehend the end of everything. The chasm of hatred and history between them remained, but spanning it was a fragile bridge of shared, absolute terror. In the quiet, functional briefing room of the human ship, surrounded by a truth that dwarfed them all, the decades of animosity between the two great empires finally, irrevocably, began to dissolve. The warship had not fired a shot, but it had already changed the fate of two empires, not by defeating one, but by giving both a reason to survive. The message, carried by Kalen and Grak back to their respective high commands, landed with the force of a physical impact. On the Valthran side, the luminous matriarch and her council convened in an emergency session that lasted for 3 full cycles. The data from the Vigilance was dissected, analyzed, and cross-referenced by 1,000 of the Dominion's finest minds. The conclusion was always the same. It was genuine. The philosophical shockwave was immense. The Valthran belief in a stable, divinely ordered universe was shattered. Their millennia of history were revealed not as a steady march of progress, but as a fleeting moment of sunshine between storms. Some counselors fell into a state of catatonic despair. Others argued for a retreat into denial. But Kalen, with the quiet support of the matriarch, argued for the path of reason, the path of survival. He spoke of the humans not as upstarts, but as harbingers, a young species whose very nature, their adaptability, their resilience in the face of self-inflicted apocalypses, made them uniquely suited to confront this cosmic truth. They had not been broken by it. They had been forged. For the Cathar, the reaction was more volatile. Warlord Jackrel initially flew into a rage, accusing Grak of being manipulated, of falling for a Valthran human trick. He threatened to have the envoy executed for cowardice, but Grak stood his ground, presenting the data with cold, undeniable logic. The Confederacy's best scientists, working in secret, confirmed the human findings. The energy patterns from the veil, the subspace resonance, it all matched. The warlord, a creature of pure predatory instinct, was faced with a predator he could not fight, a threat he could not conquer. For the first time in his life, Jackrel was faced with a problem that could not be solved with force. It was a crisis that broke his spirit, but in doing so, it opened his mind. To continue the war was to guarantee extinction, to cooperate. That was a strategy he had never considered, but his survival instinct, honed over a lifetime of battle, told him it was the only way. The ceasefire was announced. It was a stilted, formal declaration, broadcast across the quadrant, stunning allies and enemies alike. The two largest military forces in the known galaxy, poised on the brink of a cataclysmic war, simply stopped. The fleets held their positions, their engines cooling, their weapon ports sealed. The silence in the veil of whispers was no longer one of tension, but of profound, shared apprehension. The Tripartite Council was formed. The first meeting was held in neutral space, but it was clear to all that the Vigilance was the true center of this new, fragile alliance. Captain Rostova acted as the fulcrum, her calm, logical demeanor bridging the vast cultural and psychological gap between the Valthran delegation, led by a newly empowered Kalen, and the Cathar, led by a humbled but still formidable Grak. Slowly, painstakingly, they began to work. Valthran long-range sensor technology was combined with human data processing. Cathar industrial might was redirected from building warships to constructing deep space observatories. Humanity shared its knowledge of the engine's language, and Valthran linguists and Cathar cryptographers worked together to deepen the translation of the First's final message. They were no longer enemies, not truly. They were colleagues in the most desperate scientific endeavor in the history of the galaxy. The human warship, the Vigilance, remained in its stationary orbit, a silent monument to the day everything changed. It became a symbol of unity, a constant reminder of the terrible truth that bound them together. The ship that had arrived as a mystery had become the anchor of their shared future. Months turned into years. The alliance, once fragile, solidified. Initial fear gave way to a grim determination. Joint research outposts were established. Crews of mixed species began to work together, their old prejudices slowly eroding in the face of a common, existential purpose. Kalen and Grak, once bitter rivals, developed a grudging, professional respect for one another. They were the architects of this new age, forever bound by the secret they shared. It was during a routine deep scan of the engine, using a new, combined technology sensor array, that the final twist was revealed. The project was being overseen by Captain Rostova from the bridge of the Vigilance, with Kalen and Grak observing via a secure holographic link from their respective flagships. The new array was designed to penetrate deeper into the engine's structure, to try and understand its power source. "We are getting a clearer reading of the core structure, Captain," a human science officer reported, his voice tinged with excitement. The energy signature is not what we expected. It's not a singularity, not a fusion core. It appears to be a stabilized pocket of alternate spacetime. Elaborate, Rostova commanded, her eyes fixed on the cascading data. The first's message spoke of the engine as a shield and anchor, the officer explained. We assumed it was a defensive system, but this data, it suggests something else. The pocket dimension at its core, it isn't just a power source, it's vast, potentially infinite. Captain, the engine isn't a shield. A hush fell over the bridge of the Vigilance. Kalen and Grak leaned closer to their holographic displays, a sense of profound unease washing over them. Rostova's voice was barely a whisper. What is it then? The science officer looked up from his console, his face pale, his eyes wide with an awe that was indistinguishable from terror. It's an ark, Captain, but it's not designed to save this sector from the silence. He paused, swallowing hard before delivering the final, universe-altering revelation. The warning, the data on the Great Silence, it's only the secondary function, a message in a bottle. The engine's primary purpose is to do the one thing the first couldn't. It's designed to punch a hole through the fabric of reality itself, to create a gateway. He pointed a trembling finger at a newly resolved line of data, a set of coordinates that were not pointed anywhere in their galaxy, or any galaxy. They were pointed out. It's not a shield to hide behind, it's a lifeboat, and it's not meant to save our corner of the universe, it's meant to escape it entirely. The final truth descended upon them, a revelation far greater and more terrifying than the first. The Great Silence was not a localized phenomenon. It was a fundamental property of their universe, a flaw in reality itself. The first had not been trying to weather a storm, they had been trying to flee a dying cosmos, and they had failed, but they had left behind the key. The choice was no longer about survival within the galaxy. The choice was about exodus. It was about abandoning everything they had ever known, their stars, their histories, their homes, for a chance to enter a new, unknown reality. The war for the Veil of Whispers was a fight over a single room in a house that was burning to the ground. The human warship had not just changed the fate of two empires. It had given them, and all life in the galaxy, a final, terrifying, and magnificent choice: to fade into the silence together, or to take a desperate, collective leap into the ultimate unknown. On the bridge of his flagship, Kalen looked out at the swirling colors of the veil, at the distant, steady light of the Vigilance, and at the star charts that now seemed so small, so finite. For millennia, his people had looked to the stars for guidance, for a sign of their place in an ordered cosmos. Now he understood. The stars were not a destination. They were a warning. And the only path forward was a journey beyond them, into a darkness far greater than any they had ever imagined, with only the hope of a new dawn on the other side. The age of empires was over. The age of exodus had begun.